I worked at the Times-Picayune for 14 years, I guess, or 13 anyway, and I came in 1999, and I stayed through the layoffs and the reorganization and all that. I was the city editor at the time, and and it was a traumatic event, I guess, for all of us who went through it, whether we were laid off or whether whether we were laying people off or we were just collateral damage. And but it was traumatic for the city as well. I think the city really had a love affair with its newspaper. I mean, New Orleans is kind of a different place, and it's usually a little bit behind the times of the rest of the country, and also had kind of cemented this relationship with the paper. I felt after Hurricane Katrina, where the paper sort of functioned well in that time period as a cheerleader of the city, as a watchdog, as all of those things, a sort of a reminder to the country, like, you can't just flush us down the toilet, sort of. And so there was this real sort of sense of goodwill. Not that it was always that way. I mean, people were always yelling at you for something, but it was, in general, people had sort of a warm feeling towards the paper, more than you would have in sort of an average American city like Wichita. At least that was my sense. Um, and that was sort of all ripped asunder with the with that change, and it was just unnecessary. I guess the paper was reasonably healthy, and I'm not sure why they did it. I think they were trying to do an experiment. It was more of an experiment, like a lab experiment almost, to see if they could replicate it elsewhere. But it seemed like you would want to do a lab experiment in a paper that was really in much worse straits than that one. From my own perspective, I wasn't as my whole issue with it wasn't so much. I mean, I like to get the newspaper, and I subscribe to the newspaper, but I could probably live with online news. It wasn't all about the 7 day newspaper thing to me, although I recognize too that a lot of people in the city were not wired, and they depend. I mean, this is the kind of town you can go around and see people reading the newspaper, in the coffee shop or wherever, or just passing them around on the street. So it was partly about that, but it was more about just the sort of casual thumbing of the nose at this at the customers, and both by taking away this daily paper that they cared about, and also by throwing away a lot of institutional knowledge on, a lot of kind of great long tenured journalists who were just sort of casually let go. And I felt like that was not the way to treat those people or the customers. So so it was a tough period, and I stayed there for about 6 or 8 months, I guess. And then when the Advocate was bought by John George's, and he decided to try to sort of really beef up the New Orleans edition, I was interested. And when my former boss from the Times-Picayune was hired as editor here, and he was a terrific boss at the Picayune, and he's been a terrific boss here, and so I that made it a lot easier. Um, and so I guess I don't know if that answered what you were looking for, but I sort of, I guess I sort of feel like it's been very painful, but here we've tried to sort of rebuild what we used to have at the Picayune.